So guys, let's get started. Christophe, you've seen the first and the second web boom. What really is the difference now?
Well, I think quite a few things are different nowadays. For a start, a lot of the companies that are being built today are built on an existing infrastructure. So in 1999, you would launch a web video, and there were some pretty creative attempts to do video on the web. The only problem, there was no DSL. Today, you have broadband, you have mobile infrastructure, you have a means of distributing an ubiquitous internet, which means that a lot more industries are actually being transformed by digitalization and by connectivity. So I'm convinced that the next 10 years will actually see the rise of great companies comparable to the Amazon of these days. And we have a tiny little chance that some of these companies will be created here.
We're getting back to that later. First of all, you founded your first company, I think it was the end of the 90s. So, and how was it to be a web entrepreneur after the new economy, after the whole country was disappointed? Maybe share some insight on that.
Well, there was a certain element of I told you so in 2002. So you clearly felt fighting against windmills. And to tell you the truth, looking back, the reason we came through with our company Gate 5 is, first of all, we had a very compact team. I had great colleagues, and we just didn't feel like giving up. So it was more persistence than actual sense.
Okay. Also, now maybe you have to fight against windmills again. Your ebook startup Texter is in a market with really big competitors, Apple, Google. How will this look like in a few years? What is your plan to fight these competitors?
Well, you know, I'm a strong believer that you know, it's wrong to stop before the fight even started. You know, the digitalization of the book industry, which is an 80 billion industry, which is 3 times larger than the music industry, has only now started. And I just cannot believe that there is room for only 1 or 2 or 3 companies. And what we do with Texter, we actually help all companies that have an interest in building an alternative to what Amazon or Apple has to offer.
Sven, congrats for the success of your app. Maybe one question, who knows myTaxi? Great, who did come with myTaxi to this event today or yesterday?
There's a lot of potential, you can see.
That's not so bad. Maybe the history of your idea kind of started in Munich. Maybe tell us the story again.
Munich story, yeah, sure. It was that one day that Nick and I were in Munich in a little restaurant.
Niklaus Mewes is the co-founder of myTaxi.
Thank you. And well, we were in a little restaurant, and we already had a few drinks, and when we desperately wanted to go back to the hotel, and there was no taxi around, and we haven't had the telephone number of a switchboard company, so we couldn't call one. And so, unfortunately, we had to go inside into the bar again and wait and ask the waitress whether she could book a taxi for us. And she did so, and we went outside and waited in the pouring rain for another 20 minutes until finally the taxi arrived. And then the taxi arrived, and it was trash, and the taxi driver was very, very unpolite. So Nick and I thought, okay, we definitely have to do something here. And we thought, all right, there might be some new technology on the market, how you could optimize this ordering process. And we thought, yeah, there are plenty of smartphones on the market, and there are applications, and it would be great if you could do something like direct connections between the passenger and the driver, and then you can see how the taxi is approaching on the map, and so on and so forth. Yeah, and that was basically where the idea myTaxi was born.
Great, but not everybody really liked your idea. For example, the Taxizentralen, I don't know the word now in English.
It is switchboard center.
Sorry,
yeah.
Thank you very much. So they didn't like it, and there were What happened after that?
Yeah. So we have a very disruptive business model. What we're doing is that we are creating this one-to-one connection between the passenger and the taxi driver. So we are isolating the switchboard company. And of course, they don't like it because we are competitors now. And yeah, and so there were a lot of arguing in the press that was actually quite beneficial for us.
I've read that some switchboards told their taxi drivers if they use your app, they are not allowed to get any business with them. Is that true? Have you heard such stories as well?
Yeah, partly this is true, but at the end, this is not really sustainable. This way, how they react. So yeah, so at the long run, it's good for us that they're acting this way.
Okay, Ciaran. When you think about our ranking, Next 100, and when you think about a ranking which might have appeared 12 years ago, what do you think are the biggest differences?
Yeah, I think there are a number of striking differences, and I think Christophe said a word, and the word was infrastructure. And I think if you look at the people on the list today, they're not just building on top of an infrastructure, but they're also building infrastructure themselves. And that's a huge, big difference. So if you want to build a billion-dollar business or billion-euro business, even better, you need to build something that's sticky, that's a network, that's a platform that isn't going to go away. And if I look at Texter and I look at myTaxi, they're creating a piece of web infrastructure, mobile infrastructure that drives an external economy. And if I look at the list today, the type of people that can build those kind of businesses are also very different. In the past, it used to be people like me, so with business degrees that couldn't build anything. And now you really see the rise of technical people and designers that can actually build stuff. And I think that is really the ingredients to have incredibly valuable companies and not just hype companies. So that's a big difference I'm seeing.
Okay, maybe give us some more examples of companies who can create such infrastructure in Germany.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, number one on the list who isn't here, I guess, is SoundCloud. So if you think about it, they created this independent distribution platform for sounds. If you look at, I don't know, I have to mention one of my portfolio companies, of course, Matthes. It's a mobile ad network that connects, millions and billions of mobile devices to ad people. So it's, there are several examples. Or look at carpooling.com, the largest rideshare marketplace in the world, sort of helping this whole economy of sharing rides be driven. So I think if you go through the list without boring everybody, I think we could easily come up with 20 to 25 people who are building infrastructure platforms.
But let's go a bit more into detail. How is, for example, SoundCloud creating infrastructure?
Well, usually there's a couple of ways of doing it. The best way to do it is to connect supply and demand. Sounds very easy, but it actually isn't that easy. The big difference is models that don't build infrastructure, usually you build a product, you think it's great, and then you try and sell it, right? But the real magic happens when you enable other people to build products and create a marketplace. And if you look at SoundCloud, you've got DJs, you've got private people, you've got radio stations, trying to be the best publisher. And on the other hand, you have the listeners and people who are trying to discover things. So SoundCloud is trying to be a great product for allowing others to build great products. So I think that's a good way of putting it.
Okay, and others are like radio stations who use the platform and.
Yeah, maybe
apps.
Going back to Christophe's point, why should it just be iTunes, right? I mean, it's such a huge, big world, and if you look at the way media distribution is going, there's this great German word called eierlegende Wollmilchsau, and I think people don't like that, and I'm a strong believer of the verticalization of the internet, so having category leaders for every single really good use case. The home screen of the iPhone has space for 20 apps, I think, so I think there'll be 20 strong vertical apps, and the one nice thing about SoundCloud is that they do one thing really, really well. So.
Okay. So, how quick success stories can grow in Germany, we can see at this example SoundCloud we are talking about the whole time. And to show you the development, we have a little video here, which is, I think, from 2008, and we will show you 1 minute from this presentation now.
My name is Alex. I am the co-founder of a startup called SoundCloud, and I'm not really going to pitch in a traditional way today, but rather tell you a little bit of a story. And it starts about a year ago. My friend and co-founder Eric and I just got back to Stockholm from a few days in Berlin. And we were thinking about what to do with this startup we've been thinking about ever since we...
That was Alex Ljung from SoundCloud, who's #1 in our top 100 list. Christophe, what is why is SoundCloud so successful?
Well, I think it starts with a certain passion for what they are doing. These are highly technical skilled people who have taken one step after the other, but always pursuing a very consistent goal. And you know, SoundCloud wants to unmute the web. You know, if you think of it, sound is actually more important than video. And the consistency between their message, between their technical skills, and the steps they have taken is quite unique. I personally believe that the fact that this company has been created in Berlin as a very international company from day one is one of their success factors. You know, they had the time to nurture their vision, to nurture the product in a way that makes it today extremely performing organization.
Okay. And when you think about German startups in general, in what fields are German startups especially strong?
Well, the beauty of it is that, you know, there are so many industries now that are going to be disrupted by digitalization and connectivity. You know, one area that I find particularly interesting is this whole collaboration in e-commerce, such as, you know, Airbnb and these systems that suddenly become new ways of selling goods that become possible. In this case, by leveraging Facebook. We have new areas such as sensors, you know, sensors that measure your pulse, T-shirts that gives you information. Mm-hmm. So there are plenty of fields out there that are ripe for, you know, for disruption and reconstruction.
Have you seen interesting startups from this field already?
Yes, quite a few actually.
Would you like to share some names?
Well, one company actually I'm involved in, which I find particularly interesting now, is a company called PhoneDeck. So leveraging the gap between your mobile phone, which is probably the most important piece of hardware you own today, and your browser. You know, so these are the type of highly, deeply technical, but also highly relevant infrastructure play, which I find interesting.
Ciaran, what are the strengths in your view?
Yeah, I think when you said German startups, I was just thinking that at least in Berlin, but also elsewhere, we have startups based in Germany, but
yeah,
they're not German.
I have to say startups in Germany. That's what I always mean.
But they're not German startups per se. I think the whole it used to be, you know, some business guys analyzing what they could do to be an entrepreneur as a career move and sort of find their segment, and usually they end up copying something from the US, which is a very valid business model. But if we look at the teams today, and this is something that Berlin has also enabled, is it's very international teams that are incredibly product-driven, and they're really good at solving product problems. And obviously, Germany has this fantastic entrepreneurial DNA. If you look past, something happened. We only had SAP in between. And now there's a whole bunch of things happening. And maybe just as an example, on yesterday evening, actually, we had a closing dinner from a company we just invested in, and there was 10 people around the table. And 2 of them were from Germany, and like we love German founders. Most of our founders are German, but it was just fantastic to see. And these kind of people probably also don't think of Germany as their market, you know. So maybe we'll build this, and then Switzerland is next, and then Austria. But if you're a product-centric company, it's much easier to do stuff globally from day one. And so I just.
But why do they come here? What is the reason for that?
Well, the thing is, I'm not too sure if you try to order a coffee in Mitte. You can usually order in English or Hebrew. That's kind of like the two languages in coffee shops. So it doesn't make you feel as if you're a stranger. Like everybody's a stranger, you know. And it's this crazy green field. There's no big banks you need to work for. You don't have to work for McKinsey to be cool. You know, you can do anything you want to. So it really is more the soft factors. And if you think about it, the internet has enabled you to build great businesses anywhere where you can attract talent, right? Being close to Sun and being close to Microsoft is not, or being close to Harvard or Stanford is not a requirement anymore. And so Berlin is just an amazing place for young and creative people, and the internet has enabled them to build businesses from there. So that's what's happening. I'd love to say, oh, the city spent 500 million on this project or that project, but...
Okay. I've just learned we have a few more minutes, so we could dig a bit deeper here. So which are the 3 best ideas you've seen in the last 3 weeks?
Ooh, okay. No. So I mean, there's so many. I saw 30. No.
Okay, let's say 1 week.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, I saw a lot of community. Over the last years, we've created this uber social mess, right? Like, you know, I'm like totally spiraling out of control with my emails and Facebook and WhatsApp and Skype. It's a complete nightmare. Like personally, I'm not answering to many emails or whatever. So I've seen a couple of teams working on making the web less social and giving me back certain use cases for ways to communicate. And I think I've seen 2-3 teams there that I'm really excited about. The other thing is if you think about it, is that we still love shopping in stores, like we love it, right? But we hate walking around town to find, one good shop. So nobody's really helped us really drive mobile traffic and online traffic in a really cool way to stores. And I think with the penetration of smartphones, it now enables totally new models that can do that much better than before. And if you think about it, retailers used to be these guys who, wow, they wouldn't even use a phone. And now you have these young retailers that are happy to take photos with their iPhone and post it somewhere, right? So I think maybe I'll just narrow it down to 2. I think driving web traffic to real traffic, and then making the web less social, which sounds silly, but I hope it makes sense. I think those are 2 areas I was excited about in the last week.
Okay. Sven, you shared the story with us that you had a little book where you note all your ideas you could imagine to bring public ones. Are there some ideas you would like to share with us which you could imagine doing after myTaxi?
Sorry, this is very confidential. I'm not telling about them. No, I think this is something that I'm still doing. This is what we call internally...
It's just one book?
It's just one book.
How full is it now?
It's completely full now. No. I think there's something like 10 different models that I'm really interested in. Yeah, but they are still top secret, and maybe there is a time after myTaxi, one day.
Sure, okay. And do you share which field it could be in? I mean, no, it's mobility, but yeah. Is it also mobility?
Yeah, it's almost mobility.
Okay. So, Ciaran, when you look at the people you get business plans from and so on, what backgrounds do founders usually have?
It's very
today?
Yeah, it's very diverse, but the best sign I'm most encouraged with is that we're getting less and less business plans and more alpha versions of products. And I think that's the key shift. So I've said it a couple of times. I think teams today tend to be teams that can build stuff, don't need an agency or whatever. It is relatively young, so because of the way the internet is, I think most of our founders are in their early 20s, late 20s, which is okay. But we're not agnostic, or we are agnostic in that way that we'll pretty much found anything or finance anything which fits our philosophy. But usually, I'd say the trend, as I said before, it's very technical, and I think what's also interesting is that Berlin has this reputation for coming up with nice consumer apps and games and whatever, but it's actually not that correct. If you look at a lot of the businesses, there's a lot of enterprise, so there's a lot of people, working with big companies, trying to disrupt small companies, also taking innovations into the enterprise, because I think that's something the entrepreneurial community has neglected over the last maybe 5 years. And now you're seeing a lot of, for example, there's a company, we're not invested, so they're called Easy, right? And we all know how crappy printing is, right? And so they've come up with this amazing solution to make printing a better thing. So it's not just about sexy consumer things, it's also about hardcore enterprise, and it's happening here also.
Christophe, is there a best vita for an entrepreneur? Is there such thing?
I don't think so. You know, it takes persistence and courage. You know, so of course, you know, understanding technology is I think is a must. Yeah.
Okay, Sven, we've heard so many success stories from Berlin. When are you moving to Berlin?
No way. No, I love Berlin, but I also I like Hamburg a lot. I think it's a great place. I think we have a lot of, we have VCs and entrepreneurs in Hamburg, so we have both, not just one of the parties. And it's really important, we have very good universities, so the whole hiring process is pretty simple. And so we
Do you think it's easier than here?
No, I wouldn't say that. But still, we have especially one very, very good university, and we are basically recruiting all our staff in this one uni. Yeah. Okay,
Ciaran, you decided to move to Berlin, or your company decided to move to Berlin recently. Why that?
Well, there were some very technical points, so just most of the high quality stuff we were seeing was coming from Berlin. Most of our new portfolio companies were coming from Berlin, so we kind of thought, okay, it must be something happening in Berlin. So we spent quite a lot of time. We liked the city. And then it was actually around this time a year ago, we were sitting in a cab, going back to Hamburg actually. We were like, this doesn't feel right. You know, we should be the other way around. We should be going back to Berlin. And then we looked at each other, and 2 weeks later, we rented an old dancing school on Torstrasse. And what struck us immediately was that in Munich and in Hamburg, and it's a fantastic place, and I grew up in Munich, so I'm cool with it, but it's a very different environment. We have pitch meetings, so teams come in, they connect their laptop to their computer, they pitch, and then they're gone. We make a decision, and then we talk a day later. In Berlin, because there's so much critical mass and such a high density of entrepreneurs, we get to meet people when I'm picking up a coffee in the morning time, when I'm at a bar in the evening time. So I'm permanently building relationships in like an informal setting and getting to know people. Could this be a good entrepreneur? And it just gives us much, much more power to really sort of source and identify the best entrepreneurs at an early stage. So we had to make the choice. Do we want to be complacent and stay with our nice houses and apartments or whatever in Munich? Or do we want to be uncomfortable and just move? And so we said, okay, let's move.
Sven, are you not scared Hamburg is losing ground now?
No, not really.
I think it's also different for a startup. Startup, again, is that you can have a great team.
For a VC, it might be different. Yeah.
For us, it's different. Yeah,
So, Christophe, is Berlin the best place for a startup? Do I have to be here when I found a company?
Well, I think Reid Hoffman said social density matters. You know, it's a value of an ecosystem. And we are actually lucky to have a very open ecosystem. You know, it's very easy for a new founder coming from the outside to find its mark here, both privately and business-wise. So personally, I see no better place in Europe to start a company. You know?
Okay, I've heard from plans to build ecosystem as well in parts of the country where we don't have any web startups. For example, in the some parts of the Rhine-Main area. So, do you think it's possible to build a place where an ecosystem evolves, where or almost no startups are now?
Well, I think
except Cologne, actually.
You know, in any case, state intervention usually fails. When it comes to building ecosystems. So, you know, one should be grateful to have one ecosystem that has a minimum critical mass where we start to be able to compete. So why, you know, that actually is enough to cheer about. Of course, there will be great companies existing elsewhere. That's not the point. It's just the value of the ecosystem is for the type of business that I'm involved with is important.
So you think the political idea to organize an ecosystem somewhere in the desert doesn't work?
I think it's a high likelihood to fail.
Ciaran, you are collecting money all over the world from investors. How many international investors do you have in your funds?
I think we have like 20 or 25 investors, and 80% are from outside of Germany. So as far as Japanese pension funds to the Middle East and everywhere else. The reason is, it's not that we said, oh, we'd really like to have an international investor base. It's just in Germany, venture capital is called Risikokapital. So imagine an asset management company having their investment committee meeting and somebody saying, oh, I'd love to invest 2% in Risikokapital. It's just, in their heads, it's just nightmarish category. The other thing is that maybe on a more self-critical note is that the German venture industry was kind of founded in the late 90s, so just before the dot-com bubble. Everybody and their mother raised a fund, hadn't a clue what they were doing, nuked their first fund generation, so they never earned money for their investors, with the exception of maybe 2 or 3 funds. So that also explains why there are only 2, 3, 4, 5 funds left in Germany, whereas it should be, and this is maybe one really big downside of the Berlin ecosystem or German ecosystem, is there should be close to 5 or 6 times the number of funds active here.
What kind of startups is your fund financing?
I mean, there are a couple of things, maybe from a philosophical point of view. So we believe in investing in highly disruptive businesses, which is why, if you look at our portfolio, it's usually sort of networks, marketplaces. We don't do e-commerce, not because we don't believe it's a great business, but we believe if you look at a 5-7 year period versus a 2-3 year period, you can get so much more by investing in disruptive businesses, which also kind of also leads to the whole copycat discussion. So we have no moral issues with it. It's a purely financial decision that we believe disruptive teams. We invested. I
would like to talk about this copycat image.
Yeah, I shouldn't have said it.
No, it would have been my next question anyway. Christophe, what do you think? Is the copycat image of Germany still a topic elsewhere?
Well, I don't know, but Berlin has 2 hearts in one body, and there's a great benefit of having these quite spectacular, actually, startup machines that are the Sanvers or Lukash or a few others, and there is a great spillover effect as far as I'm concerned. So there are a lot of good people that have spent a few years there and learned, in particular, to be data-driven, to understand the power of marketing.
So if I want to found a company, I should go there to learn how to do it?
That's one way to go about it. In any case, I mean,
can I really learn entrepreneurship?
If you look at, when we have conversation in London, they are actually they're struggling to understand how could it be that the center for startup internationalization stopped to be London to become Berlin. So when a Valley investor is looking at internationalizing their well-run business in the US, they come to Berlin, which is a plus.
Sven, you have this copycat problem from another point of view, because I've read that your idea is being copied elsewhere. Is that true?
Plenty of times. Actually, there are competitors
who's
popping
really
up
bad?
Everywhere in the world. But no one actually in Germany. So I think we are really covering Germany.
It's not what the switchboards are doing a bit like what you've done better?
Yeah, but they are not really copycats. There are other ones they're coming from, there's one in London, one in Israel, there's one in Ireland.
And is there one really good where you think, well, wow, we can learn from that?
We are on the market now, or we've been on the market for more than 2.5 years, so we definitely are one step ahead, especially in our technical development. but definitely we take them serious. Yeah.
And it's not so easy, your platform and all this technique working together with the smartphones of the drivers. There was a big failure, I think it was Sylvester 2 years ago. What happened?
This could be, I think, there was so much traffic. I mean, yeah, New Year's Day is like the day where everyone uses a taxi, and then it was 2 years ago, that's true, and then I think the server crashed for an hour or something. Yeah, but this is a long time ago. So.
Okay, never happened again?
Never happened again.
Okay. And how do the taxi drivers like it? I mean, when I drive taxi with myTaxi, the first time the drivers not complain about bad business. They all really like the program.
Yeah, well, there are some additional benefits in the program that they're really profiting. For example, that it's called a blitzer, like a blitzer function. Like when you're speeding, the taxi driver gets an alarm signal saying, well, you're too fast. So there are additional values in the application, a part of just receiving bookings. And that's probably why they love the technique. But this is just one benefit. There are definitely plenty more.
Okay. And I wonder, I mean, I'm really happy to have your app now, and I'm using it a lot, but I'm wondering now, what will be the next step? I mean, from my point of view, I find it really annoying that I still have to take out my wallet when I leave the taxi and have to pay. So when can I pay with my app?
All right. So 2012 is going to be a very interesting year for us. There are two things on our agenda. One thing is the whole process of internationalization. That's going to be very important. So we're now in 34 cities. We have 9 offices. One is in Barcelona, in Vienna, and in Zurich. So there's a stronger focus now on a broader internationalization. And there are some more very new features coming. One of them is mobile payment. That's definitely on our plan, on our schedule, and accounting.
Okay, and how will that look like?
This is still very, very confidential because this is really interesting. Or this is going to be huge. Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. I would like to talk about how to find money, because your first round was private, and your second round kind of people who invested in your company, they really liked your product, right? How was this story?
First of all, what we experienced, that you really need a product. This is what has been mentioned before already. It's really difficult to go to look for someone who's interested in investing in your company with just a PowerPoint presentation or with a vision. So you need a product that somebody can actually touch and can feel. So this is something that we had, and then you need a lot of luck sometimes. So we had this one situation in Hamburg that we had we just launched our beta version, and then we obviously needed all the taxi drivers out there. So Nick and I started to knock on the doors of all the taxi drivers, and they asked them whether they want to participate in our service. And some of them were really surprisingly interested. And then after a couple of weeks, we had a handful of taxi drivers out there. And then one day, Thomas Grote, our lead investor, was in Hamburg. And he was there on a meeting and with a friend of us. And this friend told him that there are these crazy guys, they're doing this crazy application, and they're going to revolutionize the taxi ordering process. And Thomas said, all right, I will give it a try after the meeting. And he did so, and it worked, which was crazy because there were only 3 taxis out there, but it worked. There was a taxi very close to him, and the taxi driver accepted the booking. So this was really, really, really lucky. And then a couple of days later, he called us, and he instantly understood the potential of the application, and he invested.
Not all the startups are so lucky. So is there anything you could recommend to other startups, which are here maybe, to find investors?
What I said before, I think the first step is hardest of all. I think what you definitely need a product, something that the investor can touch and experience. This is I think this is the most important thing for now.
Okay, Christophe, which are the mistakes startups do when they look for money?
Well, I guess one of the mistakes is not to think large enough. So there's no such thing as adjusted risk. You know, building a startup is hard. You know, a team can fall apart. There are plenty of reasons why you could fail. So the least you have to do is to try something that has a potential to be very large. And that actually makes it easier to raise money.
Okay, and now we are almost done. We are going to think large. And I would like to have a short answer to my question, which has been asked here today before. I would like to know from each of you, is Berlin the next Silicon Valley? Please, Ciaran.
No, it's just the next Berlin that could be even better.
Christophe.
No, it's just the beginning of a few years where hopefully some good companies are going to be created.
Sven.
Yeah, might be the case.
Thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for listening.